Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Octant Community Meeting. Today is Wednesday, March 4th, 2020. And today we're going to talk about the next release with a bunch of new features and our upcoming priorities. And if you have any open Q&As, any questions that you want to add in, please do so in the meeting notes that I'll share here in the chat window. I'm going to share the agenda as well, and then we'll kick it off here. All right. So first up on the agenda, next release.
Yeah, so the next release is coming soon. We just have some outstanding issues that we want to make sure to get into this release that myself and Milan and Sam have been working on. We've actually I think the top one there, the Monaco YAML viewer, I think Milan just got that sorted out. So that one will be moving forward. I know that Jordan, who's on the call here, was working on moving the logger interface. We want to make sure that's in the next release as well, just because it's a convenience thing for plugin authors. Moving the terminal to its own tab on pods is one that we want to just, it'll be a better overall experience. Right now, the current implementation leaves a lot to be desired with how it jumps around and needing to know what command to execute and things like that. So we've actually, there's an issue which I don't recall the number. I'll add it to this document as soon as I find it. I'm working on that now. That kind of outlines our new approach to the terminal. It'll be its own tab. It will live in like when you view a pod, it'll live in there. When you click on it, you'll get an active session. When you navigate away from the tab, that session will remain open. When you navigate away from the pod, that session will close. There'll also be when you exit out of a session but stay within the pod, your backlog and your scroll back will stay. But it'll give you the option to refresh to start a new connection. And when you do that, it'll be a brand new terminal window and you'll lose your scroll back. So this is just, it's a pattern that we've seen other tools that have terminals use, and I like it better. It feels better. It works better than what we have now, which is kind of the slider, which doesn't always slide exactly correct when you resize things. And when you hit the execute button, it jumps and skips around, and you kind of have to know what command exactly you want to execute. And a lot of people don't, right? They just want a shell. And some of those people who want a shell don't necessarily know that they specifically have to do, /bin/sh. So it's all just a convenience thing. So hopefully we'll get that in there soon. And then the CRD link's not working after you switch contexts. Obviously that's something that we want to have fixed because it's a annoying problem. So and then the last one on there is it's not really it's more of a nice to have, as Sam pointed out, is just moving our nightly build process over to GitHub Actions. Currently uses drone, and we'd like to just get rid of that. So there's a issue with it where it's not finding the secret that we're providing it for some reason. So it takes some time to dig into it, and we'll probably be able to get that sorted out relatively quick. So those are the things that are kind of pending, and once those are all landed, we'll cut the next release. Any questions on this?
Yeah. So just one question regarding the terminals there. Do we have a limit of how many terminal sessions we can have open at any one time?
No. There's no like fixed limit. I mean, the way in the new interface, the way it's going to work is you'll essentially have one terminal open because there'll only be one tab. But yeah, there's no limit. Whatever the Kubernetes API can handle would be the theoretical limit.
There's going to be one per pod, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking if, because right now, if I can open up more tabs, not tabs within Octant, but tabs in my browser as well, and just do more sessions towards more containers.
Yep.
And I was just wondering if there is a limit at all.
No, they're pretty inexpensive. So, I mean, the limit would be, like I said, the Kubernetes API and/or browser memory resources. Like we don't put a cap on it. We just, like, if someone took it to that extreme, then we would just say it's out of scope. Stop doing that.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, Jonas, there's no practical limit.
And then, so now I want to talk about kind of our upcoming priorities. This is Sam and Milan and Brian and myself have all kind of discussed these, and they are things that are coming up that we just want to be focused on. So we've had a couple outstanding issues for documentation, specifically around just like how Octant works from a developer standpoint, how its systems interact, what it's like, how it gets information from the Kubernetes API, things like that. We really want to get just a nice initial baseline scaffolded documentation in place. This first pass will not be super in-depth or detailed, but it'll be enough so that there isn't just some blank page that people are staring at wondering how to contribute. So I know that some of our community members are able to contribute to this, but there's just no good starting point for it. So I want to kind of establish that starting point, just get something in place, and then people can kind of move forward with incremental improvements to that. And I think that'll be a lot easier and a little more tenable to get into than what we currently have now, which is just like blank page, and we tell people, yeah, sure, go ahead. So that's something we're gonna do probably right after we cut the next release. We'll just draft something relatively quick and give it some reviews and get a foundation started. The other thing is the component unmarshaling, which we started working on in this last cycle. We want to finish that up, address the rest of the components that we want to have the ability to unmarshal. This is important because if we don't have it defined with unmarshaling capabilities, then plugins currently can't use it. So we've added some things like button and button groups and some other components, but there are still some outstanding ones that I think will be useful, mainly around forms, some of the new chart stuff that we have in place that we think plugins want to be able to take advantage of. So this is related to some overall improvements to plugin interfaces that are coming, but this is just kind of a get things up to parity with the components we have and the components that plugins can use. The next thing is this has been talked about in the past previously, Octant as an application, specifically as an Electron application. This work, there is currently a feature, not really a feature branch, but there's a Denali package within the Octant source tree, and that is the work that Brian did to create the initial scaffold for an Electron application. As we talked about before, the importance of it being an application is that we get access to things we don't have access now when it is running in the browser, specifically around tight integrations with the operating system, the ability to upload files and get true paths, integration with notifications, and being able to have better menu controls within Octant itself are all things that we gain by moving it to an application. So this work was started, it kind of stalled a little bit, but in this next kind of cycle of work, we're going to really focus on bringing that portion of the code up to feature parity and making sure that we are working towards getting things moving the direction of having the Electron application.
Yes, and I'd like to add a little bit of commentary to that. What Wayne just said, and he already knows I'm going to say this, that part is very fluid. Actually, I'll just say it because not even on Wayne's list. Wayne and I had a pretty long conversation yesterday about running Octant In-Cluster, something that we resisted just because that it makes us take on a lot more risk inside the product. But as Michael's on this call, he's asked me for it a million times. We knew it 2 years ago that this was going to happen, and there's some things going on just in the community and at VMware itself. This might be an opportune time to start thinking about the transition. So we're going to weigh the effort of we still want this app because I think for a lot of use cases, particularly like my use case, Octant would be amazing as an app. But as we think trying to be inclusive to bigger companies as well, I can definitely see the argument for running in cluster. So we're going to be weighing both of these and trying to move forward on both of them.
Yeah, I didn't have it on the. No, it's all good. I didn't put it on the list because it's still very, very early, and yeah,
it's fluid.
Yeah, one of the things about that, just a caveat, just for the call, being super excited about it. Plugins, as they are currently known, will not work in cluster. So, and might never work in cluster. There may be something along the lines of plugins in cluster, but they won't look like they look now at all. So keep that in mind, because the way our plugin system works now, it would be, you just can't do it in cluster. So.
Hey, Wayne, you're probably not looking for feedback on this right now, but this is Andy. From AT&T perspective, running in clusters would help us out greatly, because we're going to have more problems running it as a desktop app than we would running it in a cluster. Just some free opinion that you didn't ask for.
No, yeah, and I mean, we know that from a lot of folks. Like AT&T isn't the only place, but yeah, exactly. Like many people have this issue of it is much easier to, for whatever reason, they trust developers to install stuff in a cluster, but not on their desktops. I don't know why, but they do. So, and we understand that at companies, large companies especially, it is very easy to, or much easier to get things in cluster like that. So, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of set a foundation of some caveats that will exist around Octant In-Cluster, and not having access to a plugins, at least initially, and probably for a while, will be one of those things.
But not to despair, because we've also been talking about how to do plugins, and one of the ideas I came up with is that we make a pretty big assumption right now that plugins are this HashiCorp plugin thing that we're not really huge fans of, but it's there and we're using it. I had suggested that maybe we think of a higher level plugin interface, so that if we were running it in cluster, if we were running in cluster, running out of cluster, at least the application Octant's core can interface it with it the same way. And then we can figure out a way to actually have some kind of plugin functionality when we're running in cluster. It'll be totally different code bases because we can't exec in the cluster, but I think there's still a way around it.
Say fluid.
It is fluid.
Yeah,
it is fluid.
So yeah, so the other thing we want to focus on in this this upcoming cycle is the resource viewer, and more than just kind of like, we've been doing a lot of incremental UI improvements and making things a little cleaner and tightening up some spacing and things like that. But specifically the resource viewer, we want to kind of approach this with fresh eyes and really think about how can we make the resource viewer the core useful component that it is, and making it drive kind of your engagement and usage of Octant through the resource viewer. Because I believe that the resource viewer itself, just in itself right now, is already, it's useful. Like, you look at it, you see color codes, you see status marks, and you kind of can at a super quick glance get an idea of what's happening. What we want to do is we want to take that a step further, and we want to tighten up the UI for it. We want to make things a little easier to navigate, but then we want to take that extra step of, okay, I see that there's a problem here. I see that this box is red, or it has has an X on it, and so when I click that, now I have actionable things in the status around these objects that I can go do, or that are indicated to me around what the problem is. I no longer have to go and click on the pod and then click on the status little heptagon link and then scroll down to the events and then see that it's in back off because I typoed the URL, right? Like, we want that information to be right there in the object status, that like quickly accessible, and we can do that. We know we have the events. We know when we have these errors. It's just currently the way we do object status is it was the first pass of object status, and it doesn't contain all of this extra useful information. So kind of taking that next step with the resource viewer to tighten up the design, make sure that the way you navigate it and the way you interact with it is predictable. So when you move it around, or when you zoom out, or when you zoom in, is a predictable thing that's happening. And then taking object status that is associated with those objects in the resource viewer and turning that into something that is useful for folks to diagnose and fix issues within their cluster. You want to add anything to that, Brian?
No. Well, yeah, I do. So really, this comes back down to the core of Octant, and I don't even know what this answer is, but really, I just want you to go look at the screen, and you can just shake your head. Yeah, I get what's going on, and that's it. You don't have to look at anything else. I would love for us to be to that point where we're just, hey, look at it. Oh, I see, everything's good, or this is bad, or something in between, and that's the gist of this. So if it doesn't quite get us to that point yet, and best believe for anyone watching this video or on this call, making that thing look hard. So now we sat on it for a while. Let's figure out how to take the lessons from getting status, creating it as a graph, and displaying it. And now let's make it useful. And just to let everyone know, there's a couple of I walked Wayne through a couple of examples of what I like. So from Istio and their Kiali project, I think they do a really good job at displaying their graph, and that's Kiali. And then there's another project which is still neat on the visualization side, but probably not what we want. From the Cilium project, there's a project called Hubble, and someone went over it. I think Josh Russo did it a few weeks ago on TGIK, where he actually went over it and talked about it. But these are the kind of things I want. Really, what I want for people of users of Octant is that you shouldn't have to feel like you're an expert at anything to understand if your workloads are broken. And I think still to this point, we're still have to know a little bit. And let's see if we can beat that. Now I'm done.
Thanks. Jonas said my mic was loud. Is it better now? Was it still too loud?
Perfect.
Okay. Sorry. Maybe I was just talking really loud. I get excited sometimes. I start yelling.
You're excited.
And then the next thing on this list is navigation. So this one is interesting. We had done a pass on navigation, and I was like, that looks great. Let's do that. And then we implemented it. Nico and Sam, Ross did a design work on it, and then Nico and Sam went and implemented it. And then in starting to use it, we realized that it wasn't going to work for what we were doing. So we're going to revisit navigation, and we're really going to focus on trying to figure out how to. There's two problems within our navigation that I think really need to be addressed. The one problem is making sure that there's a nice distinct break between the modules that exist within Octant, like our workloads module versus our overview or dashboard module versus plugins, which are modules. So like having a clear separation between the modules within Octant so that users understand when you're using Octant and you're in the workloads module, that is your focus, and the content area is focused on that. So, and then the other piece is when we start to get into custom resources, and this actually ties into a question that's in our open Q&A, and custom resources are tricky because if you've been on any cluster of any size, you know that there is a ton of custom resources on there. And when you start to put them into a list and a nav menu on the left-hand side, it becomes untenable pretty quick. You put 40 CRDs in there and you're trying to navigate them, and they're truncated and they're ellipsed or what, it doesn't even matter, and you're scrolling left and right. It's really not, doesn't really work. So we are going to be revisiting navigation and try to find a good solution that works for our desire to have the Octant platform distinguishing between the module that you're currently using, and also making sure that things like CRDs and custom navigation from plugins are usable and work well. We don't know what that looks like yet. Ross is doing some investigation into this and working through some different designs and kind of taking some of the conversations we had to kind of generate some new ideas around that. But we're going to work on making this something that is useful even when you have lots of menu items or large clusters.
So Wayne, did you share with Ross what I shared with you the other day? Now that I will share it with the entire world?
Maybe.
All right, I'll just share my screen and then I will share it with you.
I don't know.
And then Ross can see it too. So.
Oh yes, I did.
Okay,
yeah.
yes,
okay.
But
Yeah,
I think it's pertinent for a whole bunch of other people.
Yep.
Understand that we consume VMware's open source through Clarity, and we are out here trying to navigate as best as we can in here. But I was looking at something else from VMware, this vRealize automation piece of software, and I noticed this right side. And what I liked about it, and I am not a designer at all, is that it allowed us to have the separation, because like Wayne was saying, whenever you have modules that have their own menus, hierarchy becomes very important. But we still don't want super deep hierarchy because that becomes unmanageable. So one idea that we had is we could do this. Ross, what kind of menu is this? What would you call this thing?
It's kind of like a drawer in a way.
Menu?
Yeah, like this drawer thing where now we can actually change the context of the whole entire application. So I'm not saying that's what we were doing, but I said, hey, Wayne, wouldn't this be kind of neat? And he's like, I guess. So that's where we went on that.
And I do have an idea around that I'm working on that I can share with people. Not yet, but soon.
Nice.
So yeah, there's a lot of possible routes we can go. It's just kind of figuring out which one works best with Clarity and plugins and all the modules and stuff like that. So we're getting
well, that's the funnest part of this whole thing. It's like, not is it only a good idea, does it even work well with all the other things that we want to do? And if you've ever worked on a front end web application, my gosh, I think the front end of Octant rivals the back end in complexity, which is interesting. And I'm not making a determination either way, but I'm saying that some of that front end stuff is pretty difficult, as I know what Wayne is working on this new editor. He sees it too.
Yeah, so that's upcoming. And then I added a note there because we touched on Octant In-Cluster. We'll keep everyone up to date on Octant In-Cluster as that progresses. There's still lots of there's still lots of stuff that's going to come out for that. Anyway.
So for Octant In-Cluster, is the plan to have the same look and feel?
There's no plan, Jonas.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, it'll look the same. It'll feel the same. It'll be a web application that you'll run in cluster. And it'll live in the same repository. So but Octant, the Electron application that we're building, as well as the in-cluster version, will live in the same repository. They'll be in Octant together. The backend, essentially, we're going to make modifications to the backend as needed so that we can support both well.
Right. Cool. And but keep this in mind, we didn't write Octant to do this, but Wayne is less sure than I am, but there are definitely some good integration points where things are segmented away. The way that we actually talk to the cluster is segmented away from most of the app. So we would have to introduce a new dynamic client type thing so we can talk to the cluster and not keep everything in a store, which will give us, which will actually make us lose some of the responsiveness. But I think that that's a good trade-off, because you're not going to want to have 50 users using Octant and having 50 informers times how many ever objects times how many ever namespaces you have. I mean, that gets into really dumb numbers really quick. So, but I see the path forward, and I think it's possible, and we'll figure out how to move it, but not until Wayne comes. Wayne's going on vacation, so we're gonna have to wait until Wayne decides to come back to work to get that kicked off.
And then yeah, as long as they let me back in, who knows these days of travel. So, and then to answer the question that was asked here, is it possible or on the roadmap to group organize CRDs in the navigation menu? So right now, no, it's not possible. It is on the roadmap. It is covered under the upcoming priorities under navigation. We'll definitely be doing something to address CRDs and make them more usable, especially when you have a lot of them. So, and that's it.
Do you want to talk about the office hours?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, I can do that. So in an effort to give people a little more access, because I know some folks have been asking to do like some paired sessions or just have more in-depth conversations about Octant, not necessarily within the scope of the community meeting here. I've created some office hours for myself that folks can go to, and I will put a link. I'll put a link in here. But yeah, so it's Thursdays between, I think I set up between 1 and 5 p.m. Eastern time, and folks can go in and reserve a slot and just can ask questions, ask for help on issues, talk, whatever, basically anything Octant related. I'm happy to talk about it, help folks if you're thinking about using Octant at your company or whatever it is. That's what it'll be there for. So I'll add that to these notes.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea for people who want to dive a little deeper into it. I know we've done deep dives into certain topics of the code base as well as an addition to these community meetings. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you want some one-on-one time with Wayne here, make sure you book it.
You're a better person than me, Wayne. Better person than me.
I got less meetings than you already, so it's good. It's good. All right.
Do we have any other questions, comments, concerns?
I have a general code question. I don't know if this is the right time to ask it though.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I'm trying to do some work around a mock test with a router and a dashboard, and I'm having problems getting the mock dashboard to actually work. Because it's looking for a list method, and the mock dashboard that I'm handing it, I don't think contains that, or it looks like it contains it, but I'm kind of getting twisted up in circles because I'm still new to Go and very new to Octant. So I don't know if you have a second or two to look at that.
I would definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
You post a link to me, private or in public. I'll look at your code.
Okay. And you can feel free to make fun of it. We can do it live here.
I would do it after this. Yeah, let's do it after this.
And send you an email, however you'd like to do that.
Yeah, let's do it after this.
Yeah, I'll push it up and send a. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, or one to make it easy on you, Andy, if you want, you can just add it right to the open Q&A, and then that way everyone on the call can get easy access to the link, and then we can just respond on there.
You'll have to pardon my ignorance. What do you mean by the open Q&A?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we have a HackMD IO document here that is linked in chat. If you click that, you can edit it, and you can add an entry to the open Q&A, which is the list of questions that are just below the agenda.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you.
To follow up, I was the one who put the first Q&A there. When showing off Airship UI and going through some of the other plugins that are on GitHub, like the Tekton Octant plugin, I got the question if it's possible or on the roadmap to group and organize CRDs in the navigation menu. So just my example is we had 4 Tekton CRDs as well as Argo workflow CRDs. And it seemed like if you got above just a handful of CRDs, you'd want some sort of grouping or folders, especially if you're in like the 10+ range. So I was curious if there was anything for that.
Yeah, so not right now. No, we are addressing that soon when we look at navigation. We want to create a good solution for CRD navigation because we know right now once you start to get beyond just a handful, it becomes pretty hard to navigate and read everything and see it all. So yeah, it's on our upcoming priorities to kind of address navigation as a whole.
Yeah, and Jordan, yeah, this is an interesting point. So I'm looking at Octant right now, and I have Knative and Contour, and then I have Knative, Contour, and one other CRD in my cluster here locally. There's like 11 items, and I was thinking, not only would you want to split them up, but Knative is very judicious in their applying of CRDs, and I think half of them are .internal, like they probably shouldn't even show up. I think another interesting avenue for this, Wayne, would be we talked a long time ago about being able to configure the UI.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I just don't want this to show up. I don't want any of my internal ones to show up. And then thinking about it is in the same thought when you're thinking about grouping or something like that as well. Because I could see that. Yeah, Knative has a lot of CRDs, and most of them are internal, and I probably don't care. It's how Knative works, not how I work.
Yep.
Yeah, just throwing the thought out there. But Jordan, still a good suggestion. And this is actually one of the hardest things that we have to do is you have all this information, and how do you show it all?
Always difficult.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything else?
I had a few code questions just generally for the moving of the logger to package. Although I think most of those are pretty simple, and I can probably just throw those in the Slack. So.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
All righty.
All right.
All right.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.
All right. Bye.